Hello there, welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. I have a card video for you and we're going to talk sympathy cards. So get comfy and let's get crafty. The reality is we always need a sympathy card and we're not really in the mood to make one when we need it. So I've pulled out a few things. I have this Pink Fresh Studio Choose Hope stencil and coordinating die set. I don't have the stamp set for it, and I think that's because when I purchased it, it was sold out and it never came back in. So we'll be using the stencils and the die. I have a scrapbook.com inside sentiment. These are all sympathy sentiments. And I have this stamp set at Stampendous, I think. It's just a bunch of different sentiments. We're going to start with the stenciling. This stencil set has 5 stencils, 2 for the leaves and 3 for the flowers. I have half of a sheet of Nina Classic Crest Cellar White 80-pound cardstock. I have picked 4 Concord and 9th colors. I forgot to grab the 5th one, which I will do eventually, I promise. Each stencil has a stencil number in the top left-hand corner, and there are registration marks on the stencil marking that in where an A2 size card would be. So I am going to use the registration marks on the bottom left corner of the stencil to line it up with the bottom left corner of the paper. That way my stencils are always in the proper place. So when it comes to making sympathy cards, I think that you could use just about any image that wasn't too overly playful, right? You wouldn't want a happy birthday card and change the sentiment, right? The trick is to make it look like a sympathy card, not a birthday card. So for this stamp, I'm just going to be, or this card, oh my heavens, words are hard, y'all. I can't even pull them together today. It has been a interesting few weeks in my house. Like, everybody has gotten sick of something or other. My husband had some long-term work travel, long-term 2-week work travel. I have lots of things going on in my volunteer positions at the school and with my church, and it just feels like I have not quite pulled myself together yet, and it's already March of 2024. And I feel like I'm still in that holiday break, disorganized part of my life. I don't know. Anyway, I pulled that piece of cardstock up a little bit so you can see the bottom where I line up the register marks. I'm working on this grip mat. It is the Tim Holtz Tonic Studio. I can't remember which one. Maybe it's both of them together. Grip mat. So it sticks to my work surface, and then my paper and my stencils stick to it. These stencils also have a little bit of leftover stencil spray on them from the last few times I used them. Anyway, I'm using those registration marks down at the bottom to line up that stencil, and I did take my time to do it properly. When I make cards that I don't already have a specific purpose for, very often I will leave a sentiment off of them so that I can use them for whatever I need, whether it be a birthday card, a congratulations card, a sympathy card, a Mother's Day card that is coming up here. I leave sentiments off often so that I can use them for whatever I need. And that is one way to tackle sympathy cards. Is just when you're creating, if you don't need it for something specific, don't put a sentiment on it. So the third stencil is the base of the flowers. So when you're doing layering stencils and layering stamps, the largest area, the largest open area, is usually the lightest color. And the darker the color, the less exposed area or the less stamp area there will be. So I'm going to use 3 different colors of pinks, well, 2 pinks and a red. I've got Sweet Pea, Carnation, and then Crimson. And the greens that I used were Sea Glass and Juniper. And because I wanted to use these kind of bluish green inks, I pulled out my color wheel and figured out which colors of red would be their complementary color. So they're more pinky reds, a little bit more of the bluey pink versus the orange coral pink. And that way it looks, it's complementary colors, so you know it's going to look good. So we've talked about not putting sentiments on cards you're creating already. And the next trick to sympathy cards is to make them when you don't need them. Now, unfortunately for me, I do need this to be a sympathy card. We did have a friend pass away this last week. from cancer. So I am sending this to his wife and his children. But the easier plan is to have cards before you need them. And like I said in the beginning, the third trick to sympathy cards is to just use whatever you have. I think that in our brain, sympathy cards and wedding cards have to have this specific style, right? Clearly on a sympathy card, you want it to be a little bit more subdued, maybe a little bit more calm. But it really can be anything you want, especially when you're talking a close friend. If the person who passed away was huge into golf, I don't see why you couldn't have a golf-themed card be a sympathy card. All the stenciling is done. I was just showing you how I store my grip mat. I roll it up and stick it in a desk drawer. The third color, the red that I used, was a little bit dark, so I did tap it off to make sure I did not over-ink. I am going to send this through my die cut machine with my coordinating dies. For Christmas, I got the, what is it called? The Anna Griffin Empress machine, because my husband is wonderful and he loves me. Don't worry, he got a good gift too. So I'm using my magnetic mat, and in the instructions it says to cut into the plate. But I've watched Christina Warner and a couple other people, and this is like the way that they have come up with using their Empress machine. And I tried it both ways. I tried cutting into the plate and cutting into the magnet mat. And yes, I'm going to have to replace the magnet mat, but I was going to have to replace the plate eventually anyway. And it does hold the die in place better. To add a little bit of interest to the background of the card, I'm going to be using an embossing folder. This is an old Stampin' Up! One. It's called Elegant Bouquet. It's got some florals across the top and down the left. So I'm picking what color of paper I want to add on the background, and I kind of like this darker rose color. My scrap papers are in a little bin on my desk. I cut them into quarter pieces of cardstock, and then I separate them by quarter sheets and smaller by color family. That's all. So I ran this through my Empress machine. I had to pull the instructions out. I hadn't done that before. I want to emphasize the embossing, the texture on this a little bit. I tried the lightest pink, that Sweet Pea ink that I used for the flowers, and it was too much lighter than the cardstock. It would not, it did not have the look I was going for. In fact, you couldn't even see it. So I pulled out the second color, which was Carnation. And as long as I remember to tap off, it was kind of perfect. I have no pressure. I am not pushing down with my brush. I am merely gliding across the raised surface. I do not want the ink to go down into the debossed part of the cardstock. I just want the raised part to be kind of emphasized, or, you know, I want you to see it a little bit more. There were a couple of places I forgot to tap off there on the left-hand side that got a little bit heavy, which is no big deal because I am going to cover them up with the die cut. So, no biggie. But always tap off. You know, you can add more, you can't take away. I do want to trim this down to a 4 by 5 1/4 panel so that my card has a little bit of a border around the front. That's just kind of how I like my cards. Very seldomly do I make a full-size card. I like that white border. It's just how my brain works. So I'm going to go ahead and put that down, you know, like that. And I'm kind of figuring out which way this die is supposed to go. But before I start assembling, I want to stamp the sentiment. I am pulling in the leftover piece of white paper that I used from the stencil flowers. I kind of went off camera here a little bit, and I'm going to speed it up because I did a boo-boo. Okay, I did a big boo-boo. I am pulling it. This is a Stampendous. It's an all sentiments stamp set. It is not the greatest quality. It's been in my stamp stash for ever and ever and ever. I am going to heat emboss it with clear embossing powder. So I'm stamping it in VersaFine or VersaClear Nocturne Black ink. And because it is not a high quality stamp, I had to stamp it a couple of times. And in my vigor, I dropped my stamp pad right there on the front of it. But cardstock has two sides. So I will prepare this cardstock again with an anti-static powder tool. I will ink up the stamp again. I will stamp it a couple of times. I'm not putting any pressure down because it will push out the words and they will get weird. So now I'm just going to pull out my clear embossing powder. This is in my little embossing powder tub. And I'm getting a little bit low. I need to probably get another couple of containers to put in there. But I'm going to put it in there. I'm going to let the embossing powder sit on top of the cardstock for a second or two. I'm going to tap it off. And because I am extra paranoid, I do it more than one time. Now, does it really need to be done more than one time? Maybe it does, maybe it does not. Who knows? But, you know, it's like measure twice and cut once. You know, dip it twice and heat set it once. I don't know. I just have this need to emboss it a couple of times. So I've got my heat gun out and it is all heat embossed and I've trimmed it down with my paper trimmer and now it is time for assembly. I will use my double-sided adhesive, my ATG, to adhere this pattern paper, or the embossed cardstock to the card front. Clearly you can see I used the back of that paper once before, but again, cardstock has two sides and both sides work. I'm going to go ahead and center this panel into my card base. I'm just using a white card base for this card. That's kind of another thing. I didn't think I should be doing anything super loud. So I went with the white card base. I am going to put my floral die down the middle and the sentiment on the bottom over to the right. I'm going to adhere that flower bunch with some liquid glue. And that is because that background is no longer flat. So I want the flowers, the die cut, to stick to whatever part of the cardstock it touches. I could also have put it up with foam tape, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to cut all those little pieces of foam tape because I didn't want to. I just didn't want to. I am going to put foam tape behind the sentiment though. So I've got my big roll of Altenew foam tape. Altenew foam tape is a little bit instant grippier. Yes, that's a word. I don't know if it's a word or not, but it grips more quickly, grips quicker. I don't know what the right English is here, than the Scotch tape. So you really only get one shot with this. If you put it down, it's staying. So you could put liquid glue on the sticky side just to give you a minute to squish it around, or you can throw caution to the wind and just hope you get it on straight the first time. I am going to use the scrapbook.com stamp for the inside. I clearly should have done this part before I put my card together, but I'm going to stick my card into my MISTI. I'm putting it in, long ways. So I will be stamping kind of sideways, if that makes sense. And I pulled out my MISTI so that I got my stamp straight. Spoiler alert, I didn't. I don't even know. I don't know how it did not go on straight. I could fix it. I won't. I could put another piece of that rose-colored cardstock down and then put a piece of white cardstock on top of it to stamp on. But I won't. It's a handmade card. And my friend knows that I never would go and buy a card. She knows the card she's going to get from me is going to be a handmade card, so whatever. I did heat set that because I inked it twice and I didn't want it to smear on the inside of the card. I am going to add a little bit of subtle bling. And that is just because I felt like it needed just a little something. So that's another thing. Sympathy cards and wedding cards, they need to have just that little bit extra, I feel like. That's another thing in our brain that we feel like we have to do. So I have these clear, flat, they're basically sequins without the hole, little discs. But they're a little more opaque. You cannot see the paper color through them, even though they look mostly clear. And I have got so much glue on my fingers that these things are sticking to my fingers. I've got a tool in each hand just to keep these things from sticking to my fingers. And then there's so much glue on my pokey stick and my pickup stick that they're sticking to that too. This is why liquid glue and I are frenemies. Because no matter how I use it, I end up with it all over my fingers. I'm putting two groups, a group of 2 and a group of 3, because odd numbers are beautiful in our brains. That's just the way our brain works. And I've put them mostly around the flowers. I do have one little bling on a leaf rather. So here we're going to zoom in so hopefully you can see those little blings a little bit. Anyway, I hope you picked up a couple of tips about sympathy cards. Make them before you need them because then you don't have to stress it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed my video. I have a couple of other videos here that I think you would like. I also have a subscribe button. If you have not yet subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you did. Leave me a comment down below and give me one of your favorite go-tos for sympathy cards. Leave me a thumbs up if you liked the video and have a really great day.